Welcome to Kosi. I hope you're having a great day. This is the show that celebrates every single day the people who work so hard to make Costa, Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. Hey, listen, I heard the name Peter Drucker the other day. In fact, I've got a quote I'm going to share with you from him here in just a second. But if you don't have a business degree, you probably don't know the name Peter Drucker. But Peter Drucker, if you're getting a business degree and you're in management, you studied Peter Drucker, because he's probably the most widely studied and one of the most influential thinkers as it relates to management. He's impacted managers worldwide. He said that managers are a function. They have a very distinct function and very distinct responsibilities, and he developed entire models around that helped all of us that left school and went into corporate America, became a really, really important part of what we did. So Peter Drucker, big impact. In fact, he died in 2005, so he lived a terrific life and had an awesome impact on business around the world. But one of the things he said is this: if you want to succeed, don't be the expert in what used to work. I thought that's a pretty good. Don't be an expert in what used to work, which means you got to innovate, which means you got to be constantly shifting and thinking about what are your new goals going to be. If there's a theme to coach you last few days, it's been we're setting off into a new year. It's the time we're reflecting. It's the time we're thinking about resolutions. It's the time that we're thinking about determination and aspirations. And we got an opportunity to really focus on succeeding. And sometimes you have to set your goals high and be doggedly determined. And you don't want to find yourself weeks, months from now not achieving your goals. And this is an opportunity to reflect on that. But when I think about a group in coastal Mississippi that kind of defined this whole notion of, if you want to succeed, don't be the expert in what used to work, it's the Hotel and Lodging Association, because they've had to make tremendous adjustments in the way they do business, not just in general, just because they're a very progressive industry, but because of COVID and what COVID brought to them. So I'm looking forward to catching up with my friend Linda Hornsby today, who's the executive director of the Mississippi Hotel and Lodging Association, and someone I've really enjoyed. She's been a longtime friend, but someone I really enjoy catching up with. How you doing, Linda?
I'm doing great. Thank you for those kind words.
Yeah. So it's true, though, the group that you're engaged in, innovation is part of your life, isn't it?
Yes. If we learned nothing else from the pandemic, we learned how to improvise. And anybody that was thinking of how they did things yesterday, they were going to continue to adapt, because it was a moving target.
Well, we lost you there for a second, but we did catch what you said, and that is that you've got to be very, very aware of the situation and make adjustments appropriately, and as you pointed out, adapt. And adapting means sometimes to innovate, but that's part of the survival mode you have to go in when you're in a situation like the hotel and lodging business when there's a pandemic.
Okay. Yeah, Ricky, there were so many facets of the challenges, whether it was the supply chain, which is still happening, staffing still happening, not to the same extent, but and then the staffing had another element to it, that the management was working, triple shifts, or the few employees that they did have were having to work overtime. Well, that's very costly. It's very, yeah. And so
when you look, you're a very numbers oriented person. You study the numbers big time. So at a very high level, what do the numbers tell you about how the hotel and lodging industry is doing these days?
Well, these days, if you look nationwide and internationally, it's doing great. Mainly because when they compare year over year, but when you're, especially internationally, when you're comparing year over year, last year a lot of those countries were closed, and so we're on the coast and in Mississippi are experiencing just the opposite of that, because we did so phenomenally in occupancy and ADR and RevPAR during 20 and 21 that now we're showing a decline year over year. But that's because all of the rest of the markets are open. And so that will level out, and we'll start seeing some more realistic numbers.
So do you follow the casino industry very closely?
We do. Yes.
So how are their numbers?
Oh, they're doing great. They are doing better than expected. And, we couldn't be happier because everybody benefits from that.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. What's interesting is, and we've had these conversations many times, but if you just as a point of reflection and reminder, that we had all this, of course, the pandemic was happening, and we had this money that was coming into the community that was helping, especially people who were temporarily out of jobs. So just a mountain of money coming into the community. And that helped kind of spur along people, a lot of pent up demand. People wanted to go somewhere. A lot of people doing drive-in because they felt safe doing it that way. But, a lot of wonderment about once that money ran out, what was the impact going to be? How much of a sort of a downturn would we see on the heels of all that? Do you have a concern about that today? What do you see going forward?
Well, no, I think when we level out, we will still be better than we were, mainly because we were exposed to new markets that had not been here in the last several years. And so this showed them, not only it reminded them that we're here, but it reminded them of what we have here. And so that was a nice reminder. I think time will tell. In the next 6 months, we'll be able to see, if we're rising above 2019 or 18. I forget what the benchmark year is anymore.
Yeah. Hey, but Linda, what's interesting about what you just said, and that was one of the goals going into this. The goal going into this was there are a lot of people who are looking for a safe place to visit that they can go to in their car. And so there was a lot of marketing around we always did a little bit of this, obviously. We were always focused on the drive-in market since so many other people who visit here were in cars. But we doubled down on that. We used a lot of our marketing dollars to do that. The casinos got really focused on that as well. We knew going into that we were going to introduce this market to people who had not been here before. This is the point you just made. And the reverberation that happens around that, the word of mouth, the sharing the experience, telling their friends and family, man, there's a lot to be said for that reverberation, isn't there?
Yeah, our presence on social media just greatly enhanced because of people that were here and, sharing it with their friends and with their followers and everyone else. So yeah. And once everybody went back to work and back, from our markets that we were drawing from, and the money ran, then it started being, more telling. But even at the end of last year, we were doing well. It's just that now everybody's open. And so we're going to see some leveling off. But I do think we're going to have gained. I do think we're going to have seen a gain.
One of the things that you do, and you can help people understand what this benchmark is, but you're able to look at rates. You're able to look at rates in very specific ways. Tell about the analysis that you do, and what does it tell you about how we're doing?
Well, our rates have increased. I mean, they're not lower. They're not. Used to be a day whenever occupancy dropped, boy, they dropped the rates real quick, and that is not happening anymore. You've got revenue yield managers that are in management now, and they know how to work those numbers hourly, not daily, not weekly, hourly. And so they know how to make them work. So the ADR, the average daily rate, has not dropped like it would have in 10 years ago. And RevPAR, they're selling the right number of rooms at the right price, that's the most important. Not only to the hotels, but also to the people who benefit from the hotel room taxes, because it keeps that revenue up.
That's so good to hear. It's so good to hear. I've talked to, some attractions in coastal Mississippi have seen a downturn. Some have continued to see really solid numbers. I think, okay, we're coming to the end of the segment, but when we come back on the other side, I'm curious about what your thoughts about the fact that while hotel occupancy may be where we want it to be and that the revenue related to that is where we want it to be, some attractions are maybe doing a little bit better than others. What that tells me is that maybe they're coming here, but they don't have quite as much disposable income as they had, during the height of the pandemic. But I'm not sure about that. I'm just curious about what your thoughts are. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Linda Hornsby. Welcome back to Coast. Hey, by the way, before we go back to Linda Hornsby, to continue our conversation about the Hotel and Lodging Association and all the measurements and observations that she has, I wanted to give a shout out to one of the things. Of course, Coast View comes to you on 103.1 FM. We're very active in social media at SuperTalk, at the SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast page. We're at the SuperTalk Mississippi page, at SuperTalk Mississippi YouTube page. Ricky Matthews / Coast View has his own page. But man, we get able to get so many numbers, and the level of engagement that we have on our shows is just absolutely setting records. It's incredible how many people are engaged in our show. We're able to look at, we turned the top fans functionality on, and we're starting to really begin to understand how many people are really coming back to Coast View on a regular basis. And recently, Stacy Waldrop, Dennis Burke, Alan Picard, my brother-in-law, I might add, Mark Smith, and Jan Williams were all identified as top fans. And as we go forward, we'll continue to do that. But the feedback we're getting continues to be incredibly positive. People, they get a positive message here. We'll tackle issues from time to time when we think it's important. But for the most part, this is a show about introducing to you the people that it takes to make this incredible community become what it is today. And these are aspirational people who are not focused on just accepting where we are today. The status quo never worked for them. They want to continue to raise the bar. So we're excited about that. And I want to thank you. Of course, we're on podcast platforms. You can come to the show however, whenever you want to. And I appreciate the feedback that we're reaching our goals of inspiring people to raise the bar for coastal Mississippi. So with that said, let me come back to my friend Linda Hornsby, who has been on the show many times, and she's someone that I really admire. Look forward to staying in touch with her. But hey, Linda, before we went to break, I mentioned about some attractions are doing better than others. Is it your theory that maybe the disposable income is not quite as high as it was? What you're thinking about that?
Well, that's one of the factors, but also the disposable time. Whenever people, especially in our market, Louisiana, they were one of the last states to open up everything. And so people were not working. Well, they were coming here. Yay. And guess when they were coming? They were coming during the weekdays. We saw weekday occupancy soar compared to weekends. And so there's more weekdays than weekends. So, of course, they're going to visit the attractions more during their stay. I mean, we saw them staying, 3 and 4 days as opposed to a 2-day weekend. So I think that's a factor. I think that a lot of and I don't know what the numbers are on this, but there are some school districts in areas that we draw from that are going to year-round school, much like the Gulfport School District.
Yeah.
And so you can't measure it. You can't compare it with what we did before. You can't compare it to the summer or to, fall break or what, because that has changed. And so that might be some of the fall off that some of the attractions are experiencing. I think adult attractions or family attractions, you are probably seeing a better upturn, like Ship Island excursions.
Yeah.
That's adult and or children. So
the aquarium, the Mississippi Aquarium, same kind of thing there. Hey, so for people who may not remember what your association is, let's take a step back for a second and remind people what it is and who's involved in it.
Well, we're a nonprofit established in 1930, and we are made up of hotel owners and managers. and casinos, including casino resorts, anything from a bed and breakfast on up to a 2,000 room hotel. And we work for the common good of the lodging industry. We also have members that do business with hotels, vendors. And I will tell you that just yesterday, I got 3 different contacts from people, 2 hotels and a vendor, asking about membership, and they want to get involved. And so, and that was on what is typically a day off, from the business standpoint. And so, we're real excited about that, because word gets around that, hey, you got to connect with your peers, and this is the best way to do that.
You're able to share best practices among yourselves. You're able to speak with one voice.
We are,
and that's actually quite important, isn't it? When you think about potential legislative moves that would be important to your industry, there's not a lot of confusion about who your organization is and who you represent when you're having a conversation with someone in Jackson, is there?
That's correct. And if ever somebody poses a question or an issue that I'm not familiar with, the answer is one phone call away. I can make one phone call to somebody that owns 6 hotels in a multitude of levels. And so they're going to answer that question. And I'm going to say, I thought that, but I wasn't sure. And so it's good to have those resources.
Hey, listen, by the way, the investment that has been made in hotels here in coastal Mississippi has been really dramatic.
Yeah.
I think it's been great to see the growth in non-gaming hotels. When you look at that, how much room do we have to grow? Well,
if you're talking about resort type operations, they actually add to the market. If you take a 200 to 500 room hotel and they have all the resort amenities, they're going to bring more than those 200 to 500 rooms in, as opposed to the same number of rooms being developed by 50 room properties or 60. So that what we're seeing, the development we're seeing so far is resort type development, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, like Stewart family and what they're doing in coastal Mississippi. Margaritaville being a great example of that, and the success that they've had. I know there's some kind of a legal issue they're having there as it relates to the Ferris wheel. I don't know the details of that, but is there any word on when that's going to actually get going?
No, I haven't heard that that it's any different than what it was going to be. But if there's a glitch, I'm sure they'll work it out. But that's a big addition, not only because of what it is, but it's so visual. Oh my goodness.
It really is. It really, for when we came out of Mass for Christmas Eve and the lights were on that Ferris wheel, it's just very dramatic.
Yeah.
And the piece of construction that it was, I mean, you get up close to it and you realize this is a hefty piece of construction. I know that when people wondered when they were erecting it, how's it going to withstand a hurricane, for example. But boy, it's well built. It's really well built. And the other perspective I have is when you're in a boat offshore looking back toward coastal Mississippi, it's a landmark. It's almost like a lighthouse. It's pretty significant.
Whenever our children were little and we'd drive past a fair that was going on, if we knew we didn't have time to go there, we would point in the other direction for them to look at. Well, their kids are going to see this, and they're going to have to plan a visit to that.
No, there's no doubt about that. Hey, listen, I'm curious about Christmas traditions for Linda Hornsby. What does that look like?
Well, we have all the family together for Christmas lunch, and like I said, we go to Christmas Eve vigil mass, but we have all the family together, and usually it's anywhere between 35 and 50 people.
Wow. Yeah, of course, the Bohanovich clan gets together in a big way, and a lot of traditions related to, as you well know. I so remember in the early days of mine and Ann's relationship when we would go over to her mother's and Mr. Pete's house, and all these Yugoslavians would come out, Croatians now, could come by the house and sing all these Christmas carols in Croatian, and all these pastries, and gosh, there's some great traditions in Biloxi, aren't there?
There are. There really are. And it's, I think our kids, they don't take it for granted, but they rely upon it, and just knowing it's there.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. So when you approach a New Year's, do you set a bunch of New Year's resolutions for yourself?
Well, yes, and I decided this year, I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to send it to my sister whose family was staying here, and I'm going to have a list that I'm going to ask them to add to what I need to do to make it easier and flow better. So, how I do with that.
Are you a list person?
I am.
Is your list long?
Yeah, it gets longer, and I have sub lists. Clean out a closet. Sometimes it might be multifaceted, but I am very much a list person.
Well, I'm not surprised to hear that, because as long as I've known you, you've been incredibly effective at what you do. In a lot of ways, when I think about you, because gosh, you go back to pre-Katrina and then post-Katrina, you're kind of ageless. That's the way I would think about you. Ageless. That you're always going to be here. That's the way I see you.
Long time.
Yeah. So it's so cool to have that wisdom and friendship. That is for sure. Anyway, Linda Hornsby, it's been great to catch up with you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Ricky.
And
Look forward to hearing you again.
Yeah. Congratulations on the success of your organization. And let us know if there's anything big happening that you want to communicate to our audience. We'd love to have you back.
You'll be the first to know.
You bet. We'll see you after this break.